I do not accept a future where the jobs and industries of tomorrow take root beyond our borders, and I know you don't either. It is time for America to lead again.
Our new president's first address to a joint session of Congress, a State of the Union in everything but official name. And tonight's speech had as captive an audience as a president can get. A people in economic peril, a people at two wars, a people who generally seem to like him and who genuinely expect that he might have some answers for the country. How did President Obama do compared to his predecessors? Joining us now is presidential historian and NBC News analyst Doris Kearns Goodwin. Dr. Goodwin, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Oh, I'm delighted to be with you.
The president started his speech by saying he wanted to speak not only to Congress, but to the American people directly. Is that standard rhetoric at this point, or is that an important signal from him?
I think it was a hugely important signal, meaning that he knew that the American people's support of his programs and his policies were going to be necessary, perhaps, to pressure into Washington from the outside in, which was the premise of his campaign all along. You know, what struck me tonight, Rachel, was that what FDR was able to accomplish in those fireside chats, maybe it took the magisterial venue tonight of this extraordinary speech, but he had command like FDR used to. He explained what the problems were in easy language. He showed a shifting of tone of his language that I haven't heard before from him, which was really good. There were times when it was determined and resolute. You know, they used to say Churchill could roar like a lion and then pull back. He showed humor, he showed relaxation, and he showed a willingness to paint a picture of a future beyond the present that we're in. That we're going to lead the world again in energy. We're going to lead the world in college-proportioned kids going to school. We're going to somehow deal with these problems, and America's going to rise again. You need to believe in the future to get through the present, and that's what FDR did day in and day out, and I think that's what Obama showed his ability to do today.
I feel that presidents vary according to their oratorical skills and their personal charisma, but presidential speechwriters have gotten pretty good, especially at the soaring rhetoric, at the inspirational rhetoric. Even not great speakers can pen speeches that have that kind of language in it. What was surprising to me was the sort of explainer-in-chief stuff, the more wonky stuff. Let me tell you why these policies are important and how they work. It's a sort of lack of condescension. When you cite FDR in his fireside chats, was that part of what how FDR connected with people?
Oh, absolutely. If you look back at those fireside chats, they're actually explaining rather complicated banking situations, just as he did tonight, saying that, yes, I know you're angry with the bankers, but look, the lending has to happen or the recovery will never get back on track. If you don't lend, people can't get houses. If they don't have houses, people aren't going to be working to build the houses. They're not sending their kids to college. Just to be able to take some of that anger away, even though it's rightly placed at the bankers, knowing he's going to have to give more money to them and make people understand why, that's huge, and that's exactly what FDR did. He said in one of his big banking addresses, FDR, put your money back in the banks. I know you don't want to do it right now. It's safer in the banks. And right after his address, instead of when they opened the banks, that people didn't take it out as people feared, they put it back in more deposits. That's the kind of connection you have to create with the American people, that government's on your side.
In terms of this speech being remembered, in terms of this speech being repeated and resonating historically, it seems to me that the line that you're not just quitting on yourself, you're quitting on your country, that appeal to personal responsibility around education was the sort of repeatable line of the night. It wasn't exactly a soundbite, but it was surprising and memorable. Do you see echoes there, politically important echoes, of JFK's call to service, of other individual calls for people to identify with their own country's fate in their own personal decisions?
And I think what it's calling for is possibly, if we're going to enter a new progressive era where government is more involved in our daily lives, he wants to recall what it was like during the turn of the 20th century, during the New Deal, during the 60s, when people felt publicly servants. They wanted to be a part of their government. They felt responsible for our country's ills. And I think he was calling for that. Whether this gets remembered in history will in part depend on whether the actions that follow the words. Do we get an energy policy that's different? Do we get more education than we've had? Do we get health care reform? It could really be historic if those things happen. We may look back on this night as an historic night if those things follow.
Doris Kearns Goodwin, presidential historian and NBC analyst. Thank you so much for your time tonight, Doris.
Oh, you're welcome, Rachel.